1. Fingertricks. Like all events, fingertricks and clock are really important. Moving the upper dials are pretty self-explanatory. Use your index fingers to turn them like this. However, for the bottom pins, it is much harder, as technically, the most optimal is to use your pinky fingers like this. This is definitely quite hard, as many people attempted to regrip their hand and move the bottom dials like this. However, this is quite slow. If you're solving clock casually, this is alright. But if you are wanting to get faster or use more advanced methods, getting in the habit of using your pinky fingers is definitely a good idea. If you really hate pinky movements, then there are methods that don't use them and only using the upper dials, such as Optimised Pochmann that I'll talk about in this video, as well as completely other methods like Optimized 10-move memoless and 7-simul flip b-pole. In terms of the pins, you should be moving them with whatever finger is the closest. To move a pin down, I use my thumbs, and to move them up, I use either my middle finger or ring finger to move them up. 2. Skips. Now, skips are the most important part of clock, as they are relatively easy to exploit and makes your solve really fast. If you don't learn to recognize them, you could be missing out on really easy solutions, and unlike PLL and OLL skips, you'll see at least some type of skip around half the time, so definitely get used to them. Like all events, you get 15 seconds to look for skips, so take this time to look for any edge clock that coincidentally matches with a center clock, as this is a skip, and make sure to check both sides. As you can see here, we have this edge clock which matches with this center clock, as they are in the same position. And actually, we have 2 skips in this solve, because this clock is the same as this clock, which is also the same as this clock. So this is what you should be looking during inspection. We'll now go through the main skip types for the beginner's method. When an edge clock matches a center clock only one time, it is called an edge skip. In order to optimize for these, you might need to change the order of pins which you do, as in order to keep with the method, you should be matching the clocks in the order of pair, L, T, and then cross. This often forces you to improvise a little, as you can't just use a normal pin order while preserving the pair. For example, with the edge skip here at the bottom, if we were to match the center clock with the top clock using this bottom right dial, we're going to get a line. However, after the pair, we want to be going to an L, not a line. So instead of matching this to this, I'm actually going to match this edge pair to this clock on the left, and this creates an L like normal. So I'm going to put this bottom right pin up, and we're going to match to create an L like this. So if you remember our sequence, after L is a T. We want to match this L to this clock on the right to create the T. And we're going to do that by putting this bottom left pin up and then matching that to a T. Next is a cross. So we're going to put this bottom right pin up and we're going to match all of this to this top pin like that. We have a cross and then match everything to 12. Depending on where the edge skip is, your pin order will be different. And make sure to do a lot of solves to practice changing this pin order very frequently. The next type of skip is when you have 2 edge skips that are adjacent. As you can see, you have an edge skip here and an edge skip here. So this creates a free L. Instead of starting at the pair stage of the process, we're going to start at the L stage. So after L is T. So we're going to try to make a T using this and either this clock or this clock, and you can choose. I'm going to do it with this bottom clock here. So we're going to put this top left pin up, match this with here to make a T, and then put both left clocks up to match the T with this, making a cross, and then solving it to 12. If you have 3 edge skips that are adjacent, you have a T shape already. And although this is super rare, I've seen it happen, meaning you just have to do one move to match the T to the other piece, like that, form your cross, and then matching it to 12, which in this case is already done. Finally, if you have 2 opposite edge skips, this is called a line skip, and it's a bit of a different process. Notice in the regular method, we never have a line. We simply go from pair to L to T to cross. However, for the line skip, we need to change that sequence. So starting with the line, we're going to put 2 pins up that are parallel to the line and match the line to a cross edge piece to create a T. We're going to match that T to the last cross edge to create a cross, and then that is the cross, entirely skipping the L stage. That means you're going to have to start with both pins up like this. Then you now put these 2 pins down and these 2 pins up. I'm going to match the T to this last piece like that, and then everything up to 12. 3. Changing orientations. There are 2 reasons why you might want to change orientations other than just starting with the red marker or 12 o'clock at top. Note that the method is slightly different when changing orientation, so make sure to watch to the end of this section in order to figure out what's different. The first reason you might do this is that if you get a skip, you might not want to change your pin order. So instead, you can change your orientation to make the skip actually in your favor, skipping a step of your normal pin order. In this same scramble, as you can see, my first step is to normally match this center clock with this clock. However, we have an edge skip here. So if we change the orientation to make this edge skip at the top, instead of having to change my pin order with this edge skip at the bottom, it's at the top and I've just skipped the first step, able to complete the process like normal. The second reason to change orientation is that some people, including myself, believe that starting the solve with 12 o'clock to the left or to the right is actually faster because of how flips work. So now the first obvious difference is whenever you would normally solve something to the top, you are now going to solve to the new 12 o'clock. So after doing the cross, put all the pins up, and as you can see, my red marker's to the left. So I'm going to solve to the left. The second difference is your flips. Now if 12 o'clock is either at the top or the bottom, you can do the flip normally along the y-axis, like this. However, if your 12 o'clock is on the left or the right, you need to do a flip along the x-axis, like this. Doing the wrong flip will cause in the clock not being solved at the end. An easy way to remember this is that after you do the flip, the red marker should be in the same relative position. For example, if the red marker is on the left and I flip like this, the red marker is now on the right, which is on the opposite side, meaning it is the wrong type of flip. However, if I flip across the x-axis, the red marker is still on the left side, meaning that was the correct type of flip. Now the reason I said that starting with 12 o'clock on the left or right side is actually faster is that these x2 flips along the x-axis are actually much faster and easier than these y-axis flips. This is why you may choose to have your default starting position being on the left or the right, but this is really your choice. 4. Multiple skips. There is a chance that you get skips on both sides of the clock, and luckily this is really easy to optimize for. Since we are only moving up pins, the opposite center and edges get preserved. This means we can preserve skips on the opposite side of the clock while using skips on the first side. In terms of which skips you choose to do first, it really depends on your personal preferences and strengths. For example, I like to have my edge skips at the top. So for the scramble, if I orientate it correctly with 12 at the top, I can have an edge skip at the top, flip, and have an edge skip on the top again. So then I'll definitely orientate it with 12 at top. This is a new scramble, and it is inevitable that I won't have two up skips. This is because if I have an up skip here and flip, I'm going to have a down edge skip, but if I rotate it the other way and have an up here and flip, it's going to be down. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to do something different. Either orientate 12 at top and do one up edge and one down edge, or orientate 12 o'clock on the left and have one right and one left. Another thing is which side to start on. For example, if I choose to do the up and down combination, do I start on the down side or the up side? I would personally choose the down side because I can better mentally prepare for the D moves right after inspection. However, there are many factors which might influence your decisions, including how move efficient the solution is. So during inspection, you should really consider what your first moves are going to be. And these are really all the things you have to do when planning around multiple skips. 5. No skips. If there are no skips, your goal during inspection is to find a solution that is the most efficient, not necessarily by tick count, which is the number of times that you have to turn a certain dial, but also the tick count for D moves, which are generally slower. Remember, the cross is preserved, meaning you should be looking at both sides during inspection. When I see this scramble, my eyes are immediately drawn to these two clocks because they are only one tick apart. And let me check, let's do an appropriate flip. If I want to start these at the top, I'm going to flip like this, and I see that these two clocks are also only one tick apart, which means that this is a pretty good orientation to start with. 6. Optimised Pochmann. This is the first tip that actually changes the method entirely. This is a small change to the regular beginner's method, also known as the Pochmann method, which adds two very important advantages to the original method in exchange for one piece of memorization, a worthy sacrifice. Memorization is basically a number between -5 and 6, which you will memorize before starting the solve, allowing for the skip of one move, which is conveniently also a D move, saving both one move and reducing the number of pesky pinky finger tricks. This is because instead of doing something at the bottom, you can do it from the top of the other side, as it is essentially doing the same thing on the bottom, but you don't have to use D moves. Alright, here's how to do it. During inspection, after you find your orientation, flip the clock and be ready to memorize a single number. Do the correct flip, which you will be doing in the solve. In this case, because 12 o'clock is at the top, I'm going to do a flip across the y-axis like this and memorize the number of moves a center clock needs to do in order to get to the bottom clock. Remember, the magnitude and direction of the turn is important. Positive is clockwise, and negative is anti-clockwise. As you can see in this scramble, this clock needs to do 1 tick in the clockwise direction to get to this clock. So I'm going to memorize +1 or simply 1. Now, if your 12 o'clock is on the left or right side and you do a flip across the x-axis, you're going to memorize the number of moves that this top clock needs to do to get to the center clock. So in this case, this clock needs to do 3 moves in the counterclockwise direction to get to this center clock, so we're going to memorize -3. We're going to flip back to our original orientation. Now to start the solve, we're going to put the bottom 2 pins up, and now we're going to do a simultaneous move. First, we're going to use the bottom right dial to match the center clock with the upper clock, just like this. This is just the same as the normal beginner's method, but at the same time, we're going to use our top left index finger to move the top left dial the number of ticks that we memorized. So we memorized -3, so we're going to do 3 moves in the anti-clockwise direction. So 1, 2, 3. So technically, if we flip over, these 2 clocks should be solved, meaning we get to skip that first annoying D move. And now we basically just continue the solve like normal. We're going to put these 2 pins down and just continue. 7. Even more optimizations. Now, the beauty of the Pochmann method is that it is really versatile because of its simplicity. This allows for many predictions of skips or even forcing skips with certain moves. Trust me, this method, although the one taught to beginners, can be pushed really far if you're willing to put in the work. I'm not really going to talk about more optimizations, as I believe that there are better methods out there for beginner and intermediate solvers. However, if you want to learn more, you can check out this video by Zaid, a pioneer of the Pochmann method, or this one by Funny Monk. The links will be in the description. And that's really it for this video. Next in the series, we'll be covering 10 move memoless, my favorite beginner method that I believe you should definitely learn after the Pochmann method.